Good evening, East Africa. You're watching live from Nairobi, capital city of Kenya. Tonight on Bottomline, my name is Abi Agina, and these are some of the stories we are featuring tonight on Bottomline.
SPLA on the spot. The United Nations accuses South Sudan government troops of mass human rights violations. DR Congo elections. The European Parliament puts pressure on President Kabila to stick to the electoral calendar. Draft diaries. How corruption drills a $6 billion hole in Kenya's annual budget.
Welcome to the program. We start off with a story around the United Nations Human Rights Office has accused South Sudan's government of operating a scorched-earth policy of rape, pillage and killing of civilians during the civil war in 2015. A report published on Friday contains harrowing accounts of civilians suspected of supporting the opposition, including children and the disabled, killed by being burned alive, suffocated in containers, shot, hanged from trees or cut to pieces. Here is Lillian Odera with the details.
In a report detailing what had happened in the grounds of a Catholic church in Lair in the Northern Unity State, the Organization for the Defense of Human Rights asked that the soldiers involved be prosecuted. In an immediate reaction to the report, Amnesty International said South Sudanese government soldiers killing more than 60 men and children by letting them suffocate in a cargo container in October 2015 is akin to war crimes. The report, groups allied to the government were allowed to rape women in lieu of wages. The prevalence of rape suggests its use in the conflict has become an acceptable practice by the government SPLA soldiers and affiliated armed militia, the report said. Between April and September 2015, the UN investigation recorded more than 1,300 reports of rapes in South Sudan's Unity State alone. In one incident, soldiers argued over whether or not to rape a 6-year-old girl and ended up shooting her.
The key findings are that crimes against humanity and war crimes have continued into 2015, and they have predominantly been perpetrated by the government. There are instances of opposition violations as well, but the violations identified in 2013, 14, and 15 are the same, which is killing of civilians, displacement, pillaging, abductions, rape, and generally terrorizing the civilian population.
Even women inside UN-protected camps were at risk when they went out to collect food and firewood. UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Al-Hussein said the number of rapes described in the report must only be a snapshot of the real total, but the massive use of an instrument of war and terror had largely been off the international radar.
The situation is extremely serious. Tens of thousands of children's lives are at risk, and there is a need for a similar and increasing level of commitment in a place that we start describing as a forgotten emergency.
In the 12 months to November 2015, there were an estimated 10,555 civilian deaths in Unity State, 7,165 of them due to violence and 829 caused by drowning. The patterns of killing were not random, isolated or accidental, but appeared to be deliberate, systematic and based on ethnicity, according to the report. Although all sides have committed atrocities that may amount to crimes against humanity, government forces were most responsible in 2015, the report said. There was little resistance in Unity State in 2015, leaving civilians at the mercy of government forces.
It's been a problem for a while, yes, and seems to have risen again. There was 3 or 4 years ago there was activity of the LRA in the Congo, northern Congo. But yes, it's a concern and unsettling.
South Sudan's war began in December 2013, throwing the world's newest country into chaos, killing tens of thousands, displacing more than 2 million and plunging at least 40,000 into famine. Amnesty has called for the African Union to set up a hybrid court for South Sudan, agreed under a peace agreement signed last August. Lilian Odera, KTN News.
Well, tied to that, of course, Kenya is one of the countries that plays home to some of the refugees from the region. Well, moving on, the European Parliament has piled pressure on the Democratic Republic of Congo to meet deadlines for upcoming elections. In a special emergency plenary on Thursday, the EU Parliament called for an end to arbitrary arrests and other violations on human rights in the DRC, even as President Joseph Kabila's government drags its feet on election preparedness. A statement released in the plenary sitting held in Strasbourg, France, also stated that Kabila is ineligible for a third term as per the Congolese constitution promulgated in February 2006. Kabila was elected in 2006 and ran for another term in 2011. Elections are due in 90 days' time, but Kabila has shown no signs of planning for an election or leaving office. More worrying are the frequent crackdowns on perceived Kabila opponents and the humanitarian crisis that has plagued the DRC since the ouster of former strongman Mobutu Sese Seko. Still keeping it with the DRC, well, the Democratic Republic of Congo's economy is said to be one of the fastest growing in the world. Over the last 5 years, the government insists that economic growth is being broadly felt, though it concedes progress has not been fast enough. According to government authorities, 50,000 jobs have been created in the last year and that poverty was declining. But the rising number of street children in its capital testifies to deepening hardship in neglected and volatile inner city neighborhoods. Zinzi Kibiku has more.
Kevin Lusongo started living rough more than 8 years ago when he was kicked out of his uncle's house for lack of space. Like other street children, he works odd jobs, begs and picks through trash to survive. Some resort to petty theft as well. For many of the children living on the streets of Kinshasa, the capital of Democratic Republic of Congo, survival is a battle against hunger and lack of shelter. After being rescued from the streets by a social worker, he now spends his days at Nkado Yabiso, Center for Street Children, which is funded by foreign donors, where he receives schooling, food and medical care before returning to the street at night. Despite the challenges he faces, Lusongo still hopes his dream of becoming a famous footballer will become a reality.
When I grow up, I like to become a famous football player and go play in Europe with all professional players like Cristiano Ronaldo. I also want to have many fans like him. That's my dream, to become a football player like Cristiano.
Lusongo is one of the 25,000 street children in DRC's capital, a number that has nearly doubled in 10 years. Groups that help street children say they get no consistent government support.
There is extreme poverty, and the work that we do here is to reunite the street children with their families. But when you go to visit some of these families and meet them, you ask yourself if it's worth even considering placing the children back with their families, because often the families live in extreme poverty. Another problem is that we found many of the children are sexually abused, and after they reach a certain age and they have had enough, they decide to leave their homes and go fend for themselves.
Since years of civil war that killed millions ended back in 2003, the poverty rate at national levels has dropped to 63% from over 70%. But the statistics paint a mixed picture. Minister of Gender, Family and Children, Lucy Kibele, says the government is studying the issue.
When children are not taken care of, then they are pushed to go to the streets. As a Ministry of Gender, Family and Children, we are currently putting together a committee that will do everything to find why children go to the streets so that we can stop this phenomenon.
Congo is Africa's top producer of copper. National mining boom has fueled annual GDP growth of nearly 8% for 5 years, one of the highest rates in the world, according to the International Monetary Fund. Critics have accused the government of not contributing enough to the welfare of the country and questioned its spending priorities. Some have said the government spends as much on presidency, parliament and the Prime Minister's office as on primary, secondary and technical education. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.
From DRC, let's come closer home here in Nairobi. While the Kenyan judiciary has unveiled new guidelines to manage the conduct of criminal cases in a bid to ease the case backlog in the courts. The guidelines involve more active management of criminal cases at the lower courts. Our reporter Trix Singado spoke to Lady Justice J.C. Lesset, who detailed how the guidelines will ease the backlog and facilitate the delivery of justice.
Justice delayed is justice denied is well embodied in the Kenyan court system, where many cases still await the court's attention. This has left most of the affected in limbo as they wait for their constitutional right to justice. It is perhaps this dire need for a smoother system that was behind Chief Justice Willie Mutunga's move to gazette a set of guidelines that will help streamline the Kenyan judiciary's handling of criminal cases.
You know, the civil cases have there are civil procedure rules, but criminal has a criminal procedure code, but doesn't quite have rules of how to manage the cases themselves. It just guides the courts, the magistrates and the judges during the trial of criminal cases, just on the procedures. But as to how you manage the cases themselves, it's not provided for. So that is one of the things we're supposed to address.
The procedures are to guide the conduct of criminal cases and give effect to Article 159 of the Constitution, that is keen, among other issues, on reducing delay, case backlog, and ensuring that justice is delivered irrespective of status. The new system of operation that will only apply to new cases seeks to ensure speedy conclusion of criminal cases and ensure that the prosecution, accused persons, witnesses and victims are dealt with fairly, respected and protected.
Now these rules, when applied correctly or fully, it means that from the time the case is registered in court, you know, criminal cases, the very first port of call is the plea court. So in that plea court, once you take the plea, you don't give the hearing date straight away, because that's what happens these days. You give, without the rules, you give it, and then when come the date of the hearing, parties are not ready. They are always asking for adjournment because of one thing or the other. So that is the scenario without. Now the difference between the old and the new. In this new one, when you set the hearing, the case is supposed to be heard on a day-to-day basis until it is finalized, especially the prosecution. In the past, you keep giving a date, you adjourn maybe for another month or two and so on. So the delay will be wiped out.
At the same time, they will emphasize on dealing with cases in a way that takes into account gravity of alleged offense, complexity of issues involved, the severity of the consequences faced by the accused, the victims, witnesses, and all other affected, the needs of accused persons who are unrepresented, and needs of other cases. The guidelines in all criminal cases in subordinate courts and the high courts, in extradition cases in the subordinate court, and to criminal appeals in the high court.
Like the anti-corruption cases, you know, there are many applications which are made, and some of them it doesn't look like the intention, you know, there is a judicious kind of an intention when those matters are filed. Sometimes those applications are to cause delay and so on. So the rules will also address that. When such applications are made, there may be the court may require that those applications should be finalized within a set time, and if that doesn't happen, there will be a penalty. Like the court will now decide, we are fixing this case for hearing, notwithstanding that the other one is pending.
The Kenyan court system experiences obstacles that stand in the way of expeditious and just delivery of justice. These new guidelines give hope to many who hope to see the rule of law prevail. Trixie Ngado, KTN News, Nairobi.
While Kenya goes ahead to institute judicial reforms, interesting statistics have been revealed by the director of the EACC. Well, Kenya loses a third of its annual budget to corruption, according to Kenya's new anti-corruption boss Philip Kinisu. This amounts to $6 billion lost or stolen every year. However, Kenya has recently witnessed escalated plunder of state resources, with little seen to be done to curb the trend. Still, the anti-graft agency remains largely understaffed and under-equipped to tackle the menace. Here is Mark Namaswa with more details.
Developments on the plunder of 791 million Kenya shillings from the National Youth Service form perhaps the longest running script on recent corrupt activities in Kenya. And Kenya's new ethics and anti-corruption chair Philip Kinisu paints a picture on the economic magnitude of corruption in the country.
By some accounts, if you take it that we're losing upwards of 1/3 of the country's national product, 600 billion plus, in assets diverted away from the intended purposes to corruption. And if you think that this is a poor country still struggling with providing basic services to its citizenry, then indeed, corruption is a national security issue.
But Kinisu, a former senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, knows his is a tough task given EACC's limited capacity to tackle the perceivably huge corruption menace.
Our total establishment in terms of manpower is just 2,300. That 2,300 is not enforced right now. We are less than 1/3 of the total manpower. So if with that shortcoming, we also went ahead and tackled every case, we'll spread ourselves too thin, and we shall not be effective.
EACC also seems to lag behind corruption cartels in terms of technology, given the increasing sophistication of scams in the country. Despite Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta pledging to spearhead a purge on corrupt members of its government, the momentum of scandals has remained unaffected. 5 ministers in his government were removed over corruption allegations in 2015. About 300 corruption cases are under prosecution in Kenya, but this makes a small fraction of almost 55,000 reported cases. Moreover, public perception that corruption can be a way of life has not improved matters.
It is evident in the public domain, in the media, in the kinds of discussions that are going on. So that is one. I think we have to build on that and get the public to genuinely reject corruption. Genuinely reject those who practice it, and stop to admire the gains of corruption. That would be a very good starting point.
Claims have been persistent of government officials pulling strings to stage manage corruption prosecutions and clearance, especially the NYS scandal. As a step to sanitize the EACC, its staff vetting process has kicked off. The exercise targets to investigate their lifestyle versus earnings and is expected to end in the third quarter of 2016. Mark Namaswa, KTN News.
Many thanks, Mark. Well, put in perspective, losing about 600 billion shillings translates to what Kenya spends in financing the county governments. Actually, 600 billion can finance counties, the 47 of them, for 2 years. Let's turn our attention now to the EAC. 5 years ago, Rwanda's Dr. Richard Sezibera was appointed Secretary General of the East African. Dr. Sezibera's term in office has now come to an end and is expected to leave office in April. In an exclusive interview on the sidelines of the ongoing East Africa Legislative Assembly plenary session in Dar es Salaam, Eugene Anangwe sought the views of Dr. Sezibera on the East African integration progress.
Well, there may well be some people who don't know. But if you talk to the business community, who are now the drivers of integration, they will tell you that they are benefiting in all our countries. If you talk to the students, they will tell you they are benefiting. If you talk to the women who are trading across borders, they will tell you they are benefiting. But integration, of course, requires more awareness creation and so on, which is why we have involved all sectors of our people in this integration process. We are working now with the local governments, with parliamentarians, with the youth. You've heard of youth ambassadors who are now working in universities to raise awareness and mobilization. We are working with farmers organization through the East African Farmers Federation. We are working with professional bodies through the East African, like the East African Law Society and others, to continue mobilization about the benefits of integration. So yes, there are some who don't yet know. It's a work in progress, but when we last did a survey, we realized that over 60% of East Africans know about the East African community. Now, if you go into details, some don't know. Some will not know what we have done about financial integration, as an example. That now there is real-time gross settlement between our central banks, that you can make payments across the region using local currency. Some do not know. So yes, there are some areas that are technical that people do not necessarily know, which we need to continue to encourage them about. But I think we're on the right track.
You mentioned it as work in progress. Let's talk of the coiners, or the people who dreamed of this East African community, who have so far since gone before us. If they were to come back today, what sort of a feeling do you have in your imagination that they would think about the integration process that they thought of long time ago?
I think they would be, on the one hand, excited that we are back to where they wanted us to be. They would also be, I imagine, disappointed that we are not yet a political federation. Certainly Mwalimu Nyerere would be. But I think by and large they would be excited to see that for the first time this region is laying the standard gauge rail. This is the first time. The last time we laid rail was it was laid by other people, not us as East Africans, but we are now laying rail. Governments are financing their own energy plans. They're building hydro electric dams. Uganda is doing that for the very first time since independence. Kenya is doing geothermal. Tanzania is doing lots of things around hydro and natural gas. Rwanda and Burundi and Tanzania are building a new dam on at Rusumo. They would be extremely impressed by the infrastructure projects that the heads of state have agreed on. And it's planned with a 10-year investment plan. So I think they would be pleasantly surprised at the pace of integration and growth in our region.
Right. Let's talk of the issues that continue to affect, process of integration. That is, when it comes to harmonization of laws and the different political climates in the different East African countries. These have been cited as some of the issues that hamper the continuous progress. We understand the issue in Burundi, the slight political related violence that have happened in Kenya in 2007, 2008. How do we bury these issues and have processes that are peaceful, that do not hamper the process of integration?
Now, on the harmonization of laws, it is true that this is more has to be done. We have reviewed over 600 pieces of legislation, regulations, laws, and so on and so forth. And I have been proposing, and I'm sure my colleagues will continue to work on this, that we all define national in our laws to mean East African. All our laws will say foreign companies, as an example. There will be foreign companies, and they say foreign companies have to do this ABCD. National companies are exempt for. And East Africa is considered as foreign in these legal instruments. So we are saying, no, let's all have one law that says where our pieces of legislation or regulations talk about national, for purposes of business, we mean East African. And that would remove a lot of the bottlenecks that we are now facing, especially on free movement of labor and the right of establishment and the right of residence for companies.
how do you absolve the region from this blame that others say it has taken a backseat in terms of openly coming to criticize the election in Burundi, which most say that was an illegitimate election? They've sort of said that you've been too diplomatic in handling this issue, or sort of your hands are tied when it comes to issues of sovereignty. You say that, this is a national issue that has to be dealt with nationally. How do you absolve the East African community from this kind of blame and criticism?
No, I think if people want to blame, there is enough blame, there are enough people to blame. In this whatever you can call international community, the East African community included. Clearly this problem has not been resolved, and it is right that it is a costly problem, costly in terms of lives, costly in terms of the economy, costly in many ways. We've not yet been able to get a permanent resolution to this. So I am not in the blame game business myself. It could have been faster, it could have been more sustained, but I think the point is to try and do whatever people can do to return peace, stability and security to all our partner states.
Yeah. So as you exit the office of the Secretary General of the East African Community, would this issue of Burundi be one of those that you'd leave feeling like you are not probably able to, under your leadership, have a permanent solution to, when you probably had that chance to do that?
Well, certainly by the time I leave, I don't think Burundi will have gotten that resolution that all of us want. But I'm sure that the leadership, the region will continue to do what they can do to resolve this issue. So yes, but there are also other issues that we have not yet come to a conclusion on. We have, for example, for me, we have already we have a single customs territory on the ground, but we've not yet been able to unify our airspace, as an example. That's a challenge that is still out there. There are issues around the uncompleted agenda on the political federation. I think we are very close, but we've not yet concluded and completed that. We now have a Vision 2050, which will lead our community into the next until 2050, which was passed by the heads of state. So I'm happy that we now have a vision where people will know where we are going. But there is a lot of work along the way. We've done some things in the last 5 years. There will be much more to do in the next coming ones, for East Africans to achieve our vision of turning this region into an upper middle income region by 2050, with a per capita income of $10,000. That's 10 times what the per capita income is now. So that is a bold vision. There are decisions that are tough, that are difficult.
Like which one was the toughest for you?
I think all of them were challenging. I mean, when we made when we were trying to get a single customs territory working, it wasn't an easy decision for heads of state to make. When we began performance management at the Secretariat, that wasn't an easy decision to take and to execute. So it's not that they were difficult necessarily, it's that they just required a lot of hard work and focus.
Talk to me a bit about this single electronic passport for East Africans, because the argument by some people is that we need to be thinking of a way that we are able to move, within the region the way we are now, just for the 3 countries that are using their IDs. Now we are talking of a passport that others are saying we'll have to go through another process to acquire. What happens to the other documents of travel that people already have. Will there be now need to go back to now getting this passport, or we can continue using whatever we have, and if you want, you then go for this electronic East African passport?
Well, the vision is in two phases. For movement within East Africa, what we would like is the use of national identity cards or other travel documents, which interstate passes, student passes, and so on. So that is what we've been working on. So that is for internal travel within East Africa. The new passport is aimed at international travel. So it will replace the current national passports. They will be replaced by the new East African passport, but that is for international travel mainly. Now, in the meantime, of course, not all countries are on board using the national ID and other interstate passes, and we're working with them to also join, because this was a decision taken by at the East African community level. It's just being implemented now by 3 countries. I hope the other 2, Burundi and Tanzania, will also take it and join. South Sudan, now that they are coming on board, will also will join this.
Finally, when we talk of the entrance of South Sudan, this was a debate that was here during this plenary session, and there are those who are saying we are actually congratulating them too early. They have not yet, submitted, the tools and the documents that are required. What would be your comment on this particular issue, vis-a-vis the ongoing situation there in search for peace, and of course looking at the requirements of joining the EAC, and the one of them having peace in your country being one of a prerequisite for joining EAC?
Well, no, I think joining the community, we hope, will contribute to the faster return to peace in South Sudan, which is what we all want, peace and stability in South Sudan. But you said it yourself, even other members of our community have had challenges in the past. When Kenya had issues, they were members of our community. Issues, they're members of our community. So countries have challenges, but that does not mean that they are not members of our community, because it is a community. We are a community with our challenges, with our successes and our imperfections. So we hope that South Sudan will come in and join this community, to which they rightly belong, historically, politically, geographically. They are natural members of East Africa. Now, as to the issues that South Sudan has to deal with, there are quite a number. This is a new country, it's a young country. But we will work with them. So, for example, they cannot join immediately our customs union, which is the entry point into our community. We will work with them over the next 3 years to make sure that they can join customs union properly, the common market. So then there are other programs which they will gradually have to join. There are laws that they need to put in place. There are institutions that need to be put in place. But this is not new. It also happened when Rwanda and Burundi joined the community. There was some period of transition that allowed these countries to get ready to fully participate in the community.
So it's not too early to celebrate and invite them, to say that they're now finally in. But as you mentioned that, you reminded me of the issue of the markets. We are now talking of over 160, million population. But the concern for many has been how we are doing intra-EAC trade. And the numbers are not that impressive. Some are quoting 23% of the trade that we are doing is intra-East African or intra-regional. Is this a concern for you, and how do we boost these numbers?
Well, first of all, we should celebrate the entry of South Sudan. They are members of the community, they were admitted, and this is a cause for celebration. Yeah. The other things I was talking about are how to effectively get them to participate, but this is a cause for celebration, that South Sudan are members of the East African community. Now, for intra-EAC trade, I mean, if you look at the figures, it has grown from less than 10% when the customs union was agreed to in 2005 to about 26% now. Now that's a very fast growth. Of course, we want it to be 40% as the Asians are, or 60% as in Europe. So if you look at it that way, then yes, we are not where we are. But we've grown extremely fast. And if this growth continues, then I'm sure we'll get to where we want to be. Secondly, it is the quality of this trade. You see, when we trade with the rest of the world, we export raw materials and finished products. The trade among East African countries is on value-added products. And you look at that quality, which means we are trading goods on which we've added value. Yes, and that is qualitatively different. And third, it is that unlike those who were scared in the past, all countries are benefiting. So the fastest growing exports, as an example, are from Tanzania to Kenya, fastest growing in terms of percentages per year, and Uganda to Kenya. But we've also seen Kenyan investment into East Africa rise substantially. So it's two-way or three-way or five-way. And all our countries are gaining by this trade. So I am confident that we're on the right track in terms of trade.
Super. So when you return to Rwanda, what should we expect from you? When you left as a Minister of Health, and any expectations when you come back, or you'll be staying in Tanzania?
No, I'll certainly be coming back to Rwanda very immediately. My term ends on April 25th, and the next day or the day after I should be in Rwanda. You expect of me to be a good Rwandan citizen and a very good East African citizen.
Yeah. Well, many thanks there, Eugene Anangwe, for that interesting interview around EAC with outgoing Secretary General Dr. Richard Sezibera. Of course, one of his major legacies is the admission of into the East Africa Community Regional Bloc, as well as the signing of the Monterey Protocol. Well, we want to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we still have a lot more lined up for you. Don't go too far.